I used to believe trust was something you built once and then simply lived inside, like a house that never needed repairs. Every morning felt the same back then. The kettle whistled before the sun had fully climbed over the rooftops, the smell of coffee drifted through the hallway, and my son's footsteps thudded down the stairs like a familiar rhythm I didn't even notice anymore. He would grin, grab a mug, and lean against the counter, talking about nothing and everything at once. I remember thinking, more than once, that I had done something right. That whatever mistakes I'd made in life, I had raised a good person. Someone who understood loyalty, who knew the weight of a promise. My partner used to watch us from the doorway, arms crossed, a soft smile tugging at their lips. There was a kind of quiet pride in the way they looked at my son, like they were seeing the future and the past at the same time. We were a small world, the three of us, bound by shared meals and late-night movies and the unspoken agreement that home was where we could finally exhale. I didn't realize how fragile that world was. I didn't see the thin cracks forming in places I never thought to look. It started with small things, the kind you brush off because life is already heavy enough without inventing problems. My son lingered longer in the living room after dinner, sitting beside my partner instead of disappearing to his room. They talked in low voices, laughter slipping through in bursts that felt oddly private. When I entered, the conversations would trail off, not abruptly, just enough to make me feel like I had walked into a room where something important had just been said. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining distance where there was only closeness. There were nights when my partner stayed up later than usual, scrolling through their phone, the screen casting a pale glow across their face. I'd ask what they were reading, and they'd shrug, say it was work or a message from a friend. Sometimes my son would pass through the hallway at the same time, and there would be a look exchanged, quick and subtle, like a wordless nod. I noticed it, I felt it, but I didn't give it a name. Giving something a name makes it real, and I wasn't ready for that. I leaned into the comfort instead. I focused on the way my son still called me when he needed advice, still asked my opinion about his plans, his dreams. I held onto the way my partner still reached for my hand when we watched TV, fingers threading through mine like we were anchoring ourselves to each other. Those moments became proof, at least in my mind, that everything was fine. That whatever oddness I sensed was just the echo of my own fears. There was one evening, though, that refuses to leave me, no matter how many times I tried to forget it. We were sitting at the table, plates half empty, the room filled with the quiet clatter of cutlery. My son told a story about something that happened at school, his voice animated, his hands moving as he spoke. My partner laughed, really laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in the chest. My son paused for a second, just a second, and looked at them like the sound meant more than the joke. It was a look I recognized, but not in that context. It was the kind of look you give someone you want to impress, someone whose approval feels heavier than it should. I felt something shift in my stomach, a slow, sinking sensation, like missing a step on a staircase. I smiled anyway. I nodded along. I told myself I was being ridiculous. After all, what kind of person sees shadows in their own family? What kind of mind twists affection into something darker? I chose to be the version of myself who believed in the goodness of the people I loved. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the house settle into silence, I replayed the day in my head. The laughter, the glances, the way my son had lingered in the doorway of our room, saying goodnight a little too softly. I stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns in the dark, and made a quiet promise to myself that whatever was happening, I would face it with calm. With patience. With the strength I believed I had built over a lifetime of loving and losing and loving again. I didn't know then that I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't step back from. That the trust I thought was unbreakable was already bending under a weight I had never imagined it would have to carry. The first real crack didn't come with a shout or a slammed door. It came quietly, the way truth often does, slipping into my life when I wasn't braced for it. I had woken in the middle of the night, thirsty, my mouth dry and my thoughts already restless. The house was dark, the kind of dark that feels thick, like it has weight. As I walked past the living room, I saw a faint glow under the door. My partner's phone light, I assumed, maybe another late message, another restless scroll. I almost kept walking. Almost. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the sound of a voice, low and careful, not loud enough to be called a conversation, but not quiet enough to be nothing. My son's voice. I stood there, my hand on the wall, feeling the cool paint under my palm like it could steady me. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I would look back on this moment and laugh at how suspicious I'd been. But I leaned in anyway. I didn't hear everything. I didn't need to. I heard my son say my partner's name the way he used to say mine when he was little, when he needed comfort or reassurance. Soft, heavy with something that wasn't just affection. There was a pause, and then my partner answered, just as quietly. The words were ordinary, but the tone wasn't. It carried a kind of care that felt private, like it didn't belong in the open air of our shared home. My heart started to beat so hard I was sure they could hear it through the door. I stepped back, my breath shallow, my mind racing ahead of itself, trying to build a story that didn't end in ruin. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. That I was tired. That I was turning shadows into monsters. But the feeling in my chest didn't fade. It settled there, heavy and stubborn, like it had found a place to live. The next day, everything looked the same. The kettle whistled. The sun came through the window. My son ate breakfast. My partner asked about my plans for the day. They both smiled at me. And that was somehow the worst part. I found myself studying them, searching their faces for signs of guilt, of nervousness, of anything that would confirm or deny what I thought I'd heard. They gave me nothing, just normalcy, wrapped around me like a blanket that felt suddenly too tight. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way my son would sit a little closer to my partner on the couch. The way my partner's eyes followed him when he left the room. The way conversations would drift into silence when I joined them, not awkward, just unfinished, like I had walked in during the last line of a sentence I wasn't meant to hear. Each small moment stacked on top of the last, building a tower of doubt I couldn't knock down. One afternoon, I borrowed my partner's phone to look up a recipe. It was sitting on the counter, unlocked, a notification glowing on the screen. My son's name. My fingers hovered over it, my mind screaming at me to stop, to respect boundaries, to be the person I believed I was. But my heart was louder. I tapped. The messages weren't explicit. They didn't need to be. They were full of little things, little check-ins, little jokes that felt like they belonged to two people building a world of their own. Did you get home safe? I liked how you looked today. We should talk later, just us. Each line was a thread, and together they wove something I couldn't pretend not to see. I felt cold all over, like the air in the room had dropped 10 degrees. I put the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter if I moved too fast. I leaned against the counter, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen of the microwave. I didn't recognize the person looking back. They looked older, smaller, like someone who had just lost something they couldn't name yet. That evening, I watched my son laugh at something my partner said, and the sound felt like a blade. I watched my partner reach out to brush a crumb off my son's sleeve, and the gesture felt loaded, heavy with meaning I could no longer ignore. I realized then that the line I thought existed, the one I believed could never be crossed, had already been left far behind. I went to bed that night with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling again, but this time I wasn't making promises. I was counting breaths, trying to keep myself steady in a world that had tilted without warning. I didn't know how to confront what I had found. I didn't know how to be both a parent and a person who had been betrayed. All I knew was that the silence I had once found comforting now felt like it was pressing in on me, waiting for me to break it. I didn't plan the confrontation. It rose out of me the way a breath does when you've been underwater too long. We were in the kitchen, the three of us, the ordinary hum of life filling the space. The refrigerator buzzed. A spoon clinked against a mug. My son was talking about something that barely registered in my ears. My partner stood by the counter, scrolling through their phone. I watched them both, and something inside me finally gave up on pretending. I said my partner's name. Just once. The sound of it cut through the room sharper than I expected. They looked up, and for a moment I saw it in their eyes. Not confusion, not innocence, recognition. My son went quiet beside me, his shoulders stiffening like he already knew what was coming. I asked them if there was something they wanted to tell me. The words came out steady, but my hands were shaking, fingers digging into the edge of the table like I needed something solid to keep from drifting apart. My partner opened their mouth, closed it again. My son stared at the floor, the way he used to when he was a kid and knew he'd done something wrong but didn't know how to fix it. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until it felt like it might choke me. I told them I had seen the messages. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just said it, plain and simple, like stating a fact about the weather. My partner's face drained of color. My son's head snapped up, eyes wide, panic flickering across his features. My partner spoke first. They said it wasn't what I thought. That it started as talking. That they didn't mean for it to go anywhere. That they were lonely. The words tumbled out, excuses wrapped in explanations, each one landing like a stone in my chest. I listened, nodding in places where I felt like I was supposed to, even though everything inside me was screaming. Then my son spoke. His voice was quieter, but it carried more weight. He said he didn't plan it either. That he didn't understand how it happened. That he just felt seen in a way he hadn't before. I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to reconcile the person standing in front of me with the child I used to tuck into bed, the one who used to run to me when the world felt too big. I felt like I was losing him in front of my eyes, not to distance or time, but to something darker and closer. I asked them both when it crossed from talking into something else. Neither of them answered right away. My partner's eyes filled with tears. My son pressed his lips together, jaw tight. That was answer enough. The truth didn't need words anymore. It was sitting there between us, undeniable and ugly and real. I felt anger then, hot and sharp, but it didn't explode the way I thought it would. It settled instead, deep and burning, like a coal I didn't know where to put. I told my partner that betrayal was a choice, not an accident. I told my son that trust, once broken, doesn't care about intentions. The words sounded stronger than I felt, but I held onto them anyway, like they might hold me up. My partner tried to reach for me. I stepped back. The space between us felt like a canyon, suddenly wide and impossible to cross. My son took a step forward instead, and that almost broke me. I held up a hand, stopping him. I wasn't ready for comfort from the person who had helped tear my world apart, even if I still loved him in a way I couldn't turn off. They both started talking at once then, apologies overlapping, voices rising, the room filling with sound. I raised my voice for the first time, telling them to stop. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own breathing, fast and uneven, like I'd been running. I told them I needed space. Not just a night, not just a few hours. I needed time to figure out how to exist in a life that no longer looked like the one I thought I had. My partner nodded, tears slipping down the cheeks. My son's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the kid again, scared and unsure, but it didn't erase what he'd done. I walked away before either of them could say anything else. I went to the bedroom and closed the door, leaning my forehead against the wood, feeling the vibration of my own heartbeat through it. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the door like I was holding it shut against a storm. In the quiet, the weight of it all finally hit me. I wasn't just a partner who had been betrayed. I was a parent who had to look at their child and see both love and damage in the same face. I didn't know how to separate the two. I didn't know if it was even possible. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, realizing that no matter what happened next, the version of us that existed before this moment was gone for good. The days that followed didn't crash down on me all at once. They stretched out instead, thin and quiet, like a road that never seems to end no matter how far you walk. My partner packed a bag the morning after I asked for space. There were no dramatic words, no last-minute pleas. Just the soft zip of a suitcase and the sound of a door closing that felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. The house exhaled when they left, but it wasn't relief I felt. It was absence, settling into every corner like dust. My son stayed, or maybe I stayed with him. It was hard to tell. We moved around each other like strangers sharing a memory instead of a home. He kept his door closed more often. I kept myself busy with things that didn't need thinking. Dishes, laundry, emails I didn't remember sending. At night, I lay awake listening to the muffled sounds of him shifting in his room, the same way I used to listen for him when he was little and had bad dreams. The difference was that now, I didn't know how to help him, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. We tried to talk once. It was awkward and fragile, like stepping onto ice you're not sure will hold your weight. He said he was sorry again. I told him I heard him. Neither of us said anything about forgiveness. It hung there, unspoken, like a word we both knew but didn't know how to use. I looked at his face and saw so many versions of him layered on top of each other. The child who used to cling to my leg in crowded places. The teenager who rolled his eyes but still asked for rides. The person who had crossed a line I never thought I'd have to explain. Loving all of them at once felt like trying to hold something that was both warm and sharp. My partner sent messages. At first, I didn't open them. Then I did, but I didn't reply. They wrote about regret, about missing me, about how they didn't recognize themselves anymore either. I believed them. That was the cruelest part. Believing them didn't make anything easier. It just made the choice heavier. I started to realize that there wasn't going to be a clean ending to this, no moment where everything snapped back into place. There was only going to be a series of small decisions, each one shaping a future I couldn't see yet. The house changed, not in ways you could point to, but in the way it felt when you walked through it. The walls seemed farther apart. The rooms echoed more. A family photo on the shelf caught my eye one afternoon, the three of us smiling at a moment frozen in time that now felt like it belonged to someone else. I turned it face down without really thinking about it. It felt easier than looking at it and wondering how we had gotten from there to here. I started taking long walks in the evening, letting the cool air sting my lungs just enough to remind me I was still here. I thought about what it meant to be betrayed by the two people who were supposed to be on the same side as me. I thought about how love doesn't disappear when it's hurt. It just changes shape. Sometimes it becomes something quiet and distant. Sometimes it becomes something you carry instead of share. My son asked me one night if things would ever be the same. The question was small, almost casual, but his eyes gave him away. I told him the truth, or at least the closest thing to it I had. I said I didn't know. I said some things, once broken, don't go back to the way they were. They become something else. He nodded, like he understood, even if he didn't want to. There were moments when I missed my partner so much it felt physical, like a pressure in my chest. There were moments when I felt angry all over again, like the wound had just been opened. Most of the time, I felt tired. Tired of thinking about what happened. Tired of wondering what I should do next. Tired of being the person this story had turned me into. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about it for a few minutes. The realization surprised me. It didn't mean I was healed. It didn't mean I was okay. It just meant that life, stubborn and persistent, was still moving forward, whether I was ready or not. I don't know what the future looks like for us. I don't know if my partner will ever come back into my life in a way that makes sense. I don't know if my relationship with my son will ever feel simple again. What I do know is that I'm standing in the middle of a story that doesn't have a clear ending yet. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the world feels far away, I sit and think about the line that was crossed and the person I was before it happened. I wonder if I'll ever meet that version of myself again, or if they're gone for good, like the life I thought I had. I'm still here, still breathing, still loving, even when it hurts. And maybe that's the part of this story that doesn't get to end, no matter how much I wish it would.